So in this segment, we're going to be talking about bankers feeling sold out by the UK Brexit deal with the EU. Again, I know we've spoken a lot about bankers recently, but they've been more and more in the news. And so, given the fact that they are a large chunk of the economy, it's important to talk about it. So, the UK and the EU agreed to continue talks and cooperation on financial services on March 26th. We know that it's kind of like a talk shop where they're just going to discuss legislation, etc. It's not going to be anything tangible or anything that's massive. It's not equivalency or anything near that. So, despite this, bankers who have spoken to CNBC feel the industry has continually been neglected throughout Brexit talks. Financial services make up 7% of the UK's total output and 10% of the UK's tax receipts, but the industry was not part of the zero tariff, zero quota deal concluded on December the 24th. And obviously that deal still has things like customs and vet checks, so it wasn't that great. Better than no deal, but still not great. So despite a breakthrough last month, London-based bankers are nervously waiting for Britain and Brussels to agree on a post-Brexit relationship for their financial services industry. I mean, these things are still in flux right now, and we have no idea really what's going to happen. Just a quick check on this article. He written, April 6th. We still haven't had any major updates about what's going on. In a short statement, the UK and EU announced that they have concluded technical negotiations regarding a memorandum of understanding for the industry, creating a framework for voluntary regulatory cooperation. The thing is, this is not equivalency, and this is not, the kind of the deal that I think Switzerland has in certain sectors, where when the EU changes, legislation or up standards, so without kind of having equivalency, this kind of voluntary regulatory cooperation doesn't mean a lot, but it does show that there is some sort of goodwill between the two groups, between the UK and the EU. However, it doesn't mean that we're going to have, open access like we had before to EU financial services. That's just not going to happen. But despite this, bankers who have spoken to CNBC, CNBC for me is the money channel. They're always talking to bankers and stock traders and stuff like that, always talking about this sort of stuff. A bunch of frauds. CNBC are a bunch of frauds because they're always taking the banker's side, as you can read in this article. But when it comes to this sort of stuff, when it comes to talking about the issues with banking, they're not too bad when it comes to talking about the fact that bankers have been sold out by the UK. So CNBC, who spoke to a bunch of people within banking, have said they felt continually neglected throughout Brexit talks, and they are not confident this agreement changes the outlook, especially as regulatory cooperation will be voluntary and not binding, which is just something we mentioned a minute ago. And so without it being binding, it doesn't really change much. This is about financial services. We've mentioned that. The EU so far has not committed to binding regulatory equivalence where British regulation is deemed to be equivalent to their own, with each country having to resort to its own decisions. Italy have kept the equivalence, for example, while the Netherlands have withdrawn it. And it's very interesting that Italy have done this. It's obvious why the Netherlands have done this, because they want services to go to the Netherlands. That's not a hard one to figure out. So the absence of a deal as of January 1st. So it says here, the UK central counterparties were required to have recognition by the EU regulatory body to continue facilitating billions of euros of trades in over-the-counter financial derivatives for EU markets. So I did have a look at what derivatives were. So a derivative is a financial security with a value that is reliant or derived from an underlying asset or group of assets, a benchmark. The derivative itself is a contract between two or more parties, and the derivative derives its price from fluctuations in the underlying asset. I see it as kind of like a share, but I think the leverages on derivatives are far higher. So you can gain more if it goes up in value, or you can lose more if it goes down in value. There has been a slight reprieve in that EU banks have been given 18 months to reduce their exposure to British clearinghouses, with a time-limited permission set to expire in June 22nd. That's when things are going to get really interesting by the sounds of things. Earlier this month, the UK regulator also renewed its commitment to allow UK-based banks the ability to trade derivatives on the European platform. So the UK have said, EU-based banks can continue to trade derivatives here, but the EU are saying, boss, you might not be able to do it here much longer. So IHS Market released data in February showing the UK share of euro swaps, a type of financial derivative trading, has fallen by 40% in July. So that's a massive loss of things like capital gains tax, etc. That the UK is looking at losing down to Brexit. Amsterdam also overtook London as the largest trading centre in Europe for cash equities in January, and it's going to be interesting to see how that keeps folding out through the year. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said in January that so far around 7,000 jobs have moved due to Brexit, less than feared, but there may be other knock-on effects. Like I said, these people spend money throughout the economy, that are generally quite wealthy, and so that does have a knock-on effect. Especially since there are still some rules in place that allow trading to keep going. Once those kind of grace periods end, what happens then? That's the key question. Goldman Sachs has already started moving bankers to regional offices in the last few years, expanding teams in Milan. Don't know what happened there. Milan, Madrid, Amsterdam, and Stockholm. Stockholm, quite interesting. I've never heard of Stockholm being a big trading hub, so a strange one to throw in. Since Brexit, relocation moves to Frankfurt and Paris have accelerated. A source at the bank, who preferred to stay anonymous as they were not authorised to publicly speak, said, so it's interesting, maybe the bank don't want to cause a panic within the Bank of England, so that's why they're keeping things under wraps a bit. Said that several hundred employees had moved and that the bank had taken out new licenses and new real estate, and as well as beefed up execution capabilities. They've expanded the Dublin office for asset management. So they've moved around a fair bit. It looks like Dublin could be the main place of operations, but again, we are yet to see what Goldman Sachs are planning. I think they did open some offices in Birmingham to do some more online banking and things like that, to compete with Monzo. Or that could have been JP Morgan, who knows at this point. But we do know that they are moving out of the UK, and that's the key. European banks with London branches, such as Deutsche Bank, have also moved personnel to the continent, totaling the low hundreds, including those covering EU clients. The bulk of the relocation has been to Frankfurt, the bank's main headquarters, so that's not a big surprise. But again, the UK losing potential capital gains tax revenue, among other things, especially since some of these banks may not have had a big presence in the UK staff-wise. They may not have needed a massive presence within the UK when it comes to personnel, but when it comes to trades, they could have been managed by a set few amount of people. Barclays, a big international bank, have talked of minimal impact. Sources have told CNBC that the figure is likely also to be in the low hundreds, but we know Barclays has moved jobs all around the world, with the main relocation cities being Paris and Dublin, where Barclays has established a headquarters for its European entity. So they have moved their headquarters, I think, from the UK into another EU country because of Brexit. Goldman Sachs told CNBC what politicians are missing is that it's not about the couple hundred of bankers that have been moved, but rather the revenue associated with those employees will get booked and taxed in Europe, something we've mentioned. Not to mention all the other personal tax and consumption that goes on top of that, which is a really important point, because you've got to think some of these people will be making, living in London, making probably 60 Gs minimum. So all of that tax revenue, that income tax revenue is gone. They're going to be spending money within London. All of that's gone as well. Politicians protected the fish but sold the bankers down the river. I mean, that's not even true either. But you can see how kind of personally kind of impacted the bankers feel, because the UK did a free trade agreement that gave tariff and quota free access for British fish. Obviously there are still customs and vet checks we've talked about ad nauseum on this channel. However, there are still issues that banks feel that they weren't protected by the British government, and that because of that some of them are going to move. Another Barclays banker said they were not authorised to speak publicly, said in the short term it's pretty clear that Europe will try and drive as many jobs out of the UK into Europe that are mainly after high paid jobs. So they're not even after the bulk of the staff. They just want the top dons. That's what they want. Moving clearing and the whole financial infrastructure will be more difficult. Longer term, the key question will be, where is your European centre and what entity do you use to book everything, the UK or the European one? And most likely it's going to be the European one. It added, if US banks decide not to use the UK entity anymore, that will mean more jobs moves in the middle and back office eventually. So obviously that means that, say you have staff here that cover whatever stocks or clearing or whatever financial service, if they move those personnel who deal with that sort of stuff into Europe, that means, back office staff and, people who help them deal with trades, they're going to move as well, because it makes sense, especially since a lot of European countries are about an hour ahead of us, maybe an hour, 2 hours ahead of us. So it makes sense to move those people, not to mention it makes it far easier to communicate as well with the people within the back and middle offices. So that makes a lot of sense. Eventually, you will see London and Paris as competing hubs in financial services, which is crazy. No one thought, Paris could compete with London. No one's ever said that before Brexit. London was always the financial king. London was always the financial champion. And now, you've got here someone from Barclays, maybe not a top shotter, but someone who clearly is in the know, saying that Paris could compete with London. Those goddamn cheese-eating surrender people, people who surrender at any sight of problems. I'm joking, France, don't at me. I like your croissants and stuff like that. Could compete with London. That's madness. Another concern expressed by a banker at Morgan Stanley, who also spoke on anonymity, said, while a lot of temporary equivalence decisions have been granted, there's no guarantee of an extension, and that's the key here. That's the key. Do you want to work, set up shop within a country that's always looking at extensions and, may not always have equivalency? Or do you want to move to a country which is guaranteed that? Which one is it? Because it's very obvious. These people ain't stupid. They make stupid decisions sometimes when it comes to investments and expect the taxman to bail them out. But, they know where the money's at. They know how to make their lives easier, and that's moving abroad. So he says this source says more people will therefore be expected to move over the coming months and years. And finally, many professionals in the UK capital are not optimistic that the memorandum of understanding can reverse the trading and personnel moves towards the continent. The flow has been very one way. And that's a final important point, that the flow of staff has been mainly towards Europe. If Britain was still going to compete as a major financial hub, we would not have seen so many staff and assets move towards Europe. In fact, we would have seen the opposite. We would have seen assets and staff move to the UK as the UK continues to be a financial juggernaut. But we didn't see that. And so this is a damning article from CNBC, the Money Channel. The Money Channel. And there's not much more to say apart from it's very obvious which way the UK is heading, which is, irrelevancy. The City of London is going towards irrelevancy, as, if we can't get the things like equivalency that we need, it's going to mean that more and more assets are going to leave the UK, and also the fact that simply who's going to look to the UK as the gateway into Europe, because simply we're not going to be that. It's going to be Amsterdam, Dublin, or potentially Paris. It's going to be one of those three places, not London anymore. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.